Welcome to the Juice Consumer Direct Podcast. I'm Nate Clegg, and I'm here with Carson Poppenger and Jacob Thorpe. And today we get to talk about a number of business things, but we're going to mix it up and have a little bit of fun. And to start off with, we're going to talk about fantasy football.
All right, it is football season. It's here. Been waiting all year. This is pretty exciting. At Squeeze, we've got a couple leagues that we've been running for a number of years. I think, Carson, you've got a personal league that you've been running for almost 10 years, right?
12.
12 years. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we've got a keeper league, which if you don't know, that means you draft guys and then you can keep them the next year on your team. And that's been going on for 4 or 5 years. And so I've been at Squeeze for almost 10 years, right? And a few years in, I'd been in Carson's league and I'd won a couple chips.
He's okay.
Yeah,
He's okay at this.
I had a couple lucky years, right? And Carson, I was managing some of our accounts, and Carson turns to me and he goes, "Hey, I need you to manage this business like you manage fantasy football."
That's a high bar.
I'm
That's
like,
a high
listen,
bar. That's going to be great.
Say
then.
less, right? This
Yeah.
is a great metaphor that really resonated with me.
I could just see the way that Jacob thinks, with the way he sees things, the way he analyzes the data, the way he's looking at the moves he wants to make, the way, it's like, hey, we're going to pivot off this, move to this. And I just thought, yeah, like this is just like what we need to do with the business and like manage the business and the accounts that we have, like you manage your fantasy football teams. And like, I don't know, it's like, couldn't be any more clear metaphor for Jacob on that. So.
Yeah, well, it resonated. And, we're constantly trying. It's a big deal at Squeeze. Like all of our team kind of joins in the league, and it's a bit of a time investment. Nate joined last year for the first time.
Yeah.
The trade negotiations, the waiver wire moves, the matchups, the setting your lineups.
It's a very active league.
Oh,
like people are putting in the effort.
Extremely active. And as I've thought about it, I'm like, it's football season, but a lot of these strategies that we have in fantasy football really kind of relate to the way that we run our business. And I have a list of strategies that we use in fantasy football. Now, this is at risk. I
know
realize that this is risky.
Your secret sauce here.
Because, I did bring this trophy from last year. I'm at risk of revealing some of the fantasy football secret sauce.
Well, we have the other trophy, too, from the other league. And you can see the three of our names pretty all over the place. Well, I got the one, from the 1 year.
Yeah, 1 for 1's not bad.
Yeah, but we've got Carson in here. And we got Jacob all over this trophy
2
as
years
well.
ago, me and Carson split the chip.
That's right.
It was the Damar Hamlin game.
Yeah.
I remember that.
It's the final game of the season.
Yeah.
I actually remember watching
Bills Bengals, wasn't it?
Yeah. I remember watching ESPN, and it was a topic after the tragedy kind of settled that this is going to affect some fantasy football leagues. And then it really did. It affected your guys' league.
I had like Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs, and he had Jamar Chase left to go. He was up by like 15 points, so it was very much in question. So we ended up splitting it down the middle.
That could have gone either way, for real,
Yeah.
with those players.
I just thought like it's probably the best way to do it, and just kind of we actually noted it on the trophy. Was at the Damar Hamlin game,
Never forgotten.
and where we split the championship.
Yeah.
In 22.
So there's some good secret sauce in the end, right? There's some valuable tricks or strategies, better put, that are up for grabs now that you're going to go over. So that's pretty good. So let's put these guys back
Fantasy
here.
football for me, like it makes football a lot more interesting because like although I love watching a football game, I love having it on the background. It's fall time, gets a little cooler, watch some football, but I'm not one to just like watch every down, either. So to be able to kind of see what's going on in the different games, follow the players that are doing well, you start to learn the different storylines. It just makes it a lot more interesting for me anyway.
Yeah.
And a lot of fun to kind of pass the time. And it's like once a week you set your lineup and all that. So if you've done fantasy football, you understand. If you don't, it's you just need to get into it and try it. So
Well, I've got a family league as well on top of the Squeeze leagues, and my sons are now in it, and they're 16, 15, and 12, so they can kind of understand it, the older ones especially, and it's way more fun for them. They're now into the NFL, and they were not into the NFL until fantasy football happened. And at first, it was kind of like me having 3 teams that would play each other and things, and all of a sudden there was 3 Nate teams playing in the family league, but now they're figuring it out on their own, so it's pretty cool.
I've got a 4-year-old who's at night we read. We have some fantasy football magazines that we read together. He's
That's
a
awesome.
huge Eagles fan,
Yeah.
and he always wants to read about like the Eagles players and stuff. And it's become this thing that we do. He's like, "When's football season? How much longer is football season?" It's just because that's something that we do like on Sunday together, right? We watch the games together, and it's
Yeah.
been fun.
Yeah.
But we do have some real relevant business lessons that you can learn for fantasy football because, run your business like a good fantasy football team. Magic might happen, So, first off, draft strategy. It's draft season. When Nate joined our team, he made an observation that we had some people with very high potential who were recently graduated from college, maybe lower cost, high talent people. In a fantasy football draft, there's something called ADP. It's your average draft position. And basically what it is it's the average draft position over thousands of drafts on the different leagues that you could do. So you could do an ESPN league, a Yahoo league, a Sleeper league, a CBS league, and all of them have their own unique ADPs, average draft positions. And in a draft, there's kind of a strategy. When you start out, you've got your core people, your first, second, third, fourth round team. Those are people that you need to anchor your team around, right? Those are the people who you're investing a lot in, and that's who the team kind of is held
Can make
down
or
by,
break.
right?
Yep,
Could be
totally.
a hero running back or the Tyreek Hills, the Justin Jeffersons. I think in our team, we have our core people, and that's who we build it around. And they might be a little bit more expensive, and they might come with a higher draft capital, but those are the people that you can anchor your team around.
Yeah.
But later on, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th round, you're looking for high upside players. You're looking for people who might have a lower draft investment cost, but with higher upside. So that's when you're looking for your young guns, your rookies, right? The Malik Neighbors, the Rome Odunzes, the Jonathan Brooks on the Carolina Panthers, the guys that while they haven't done it yet, there's a situation created where they can grow and take advantage of their opportunity.
You can see the potential in them. And it's very true. When I came here to Squeeze, and I met especially the account management team and the ops management team, and these people are incredibly talented, and you could see it, right? And when you're in a position where you can look at people and evaluate talent, you can all of a sudden see, okay, here's potential, and this business is going to be better off for having this person, so I'm going to do a little bit of investment into them early on, and they're going to pay off in the long run. And not everybody works out, but what I've seen at Squeeze is genuinely a lot of people have worked out because you've been able to identify the talent and then develop that talent. And that's a big deal for a business. Any business that wants to be around for a long time and sustainable, especially if you don't have like maybe huge bank account to just go buy talent, this sometimes is even better, really, is to develop this. And in baseball, they always talk about how you have all your people and your talent that's in the minor leagues that you're developing, right? Your developmental leagues. That's very much what's happening at Squeeze, and that's awesome.
Yeah, we call it our bench, right?
Yeah.
You got to have a deep bench. The best thing you can do in leadership is training your own replacement.
Yep.
So if you can establish a bench of these low cost people who can grow into
High upside, high ceiling, high potential. Yeah.
your team looks a lot different, right? All right.
Sure.
I got another one.
Okay, we're ready.
How do you find hidden gems? Stats versus eye test. This is something that I have seen in our decision making on an executive level. I think a lot of times you show up to an executive meeting, you get a little bit of the context, maybe you haven't been in the day-to-day, and you make a decision. I watch a lot of football. I love watching football. It's one of my favorite things to do. I love football season for that reason. And I think that the eye test is really important too. So I think you can look at the stats and you can look at eye tests. And a lot of times those two things will tell you something that might even be a little bit different, right? Like I might watch a running back play the number one run defense in the league, and they might have an offensive lineman who is out. Their top offensive lineman is out, and he has a really poor game. And we say, okay, he's just not a good player. Well, no, there's so much context around that where if I were just to base my decision off of the data, I would end up making a decision that would potentially hurt my team. When I understand that actually, the left tackle was out, and they had a backup quarterback in, and they were playing the number one run defense, when someone who might be a little bit more casual would say, hey, that's just not a good player. So understanding the full scope of things, the eye test and the data when you make a decision. If you're going to be a leader, be in the details. Understand everything that's happening. Understand the data, but also understand the context around the important decisions that you're making.
You see it a lot in the scoring too. Like if you look at the stats, you'll see, well, all of a sudden a player will have a breakout game and they'll have 20 fantasy football points. You're like, oh, dang, I can use all 20 of those. But then all of a sudden they tail down and they go up. And the only way to really understand why they're having those big variances in points is you got to watch. You got to see what's up and see how that player plays and see what the offense is like and, work your way through it.
Okay, my memory here is like failing me because I'm getting old, but who's that Cowboys receiver a few years ago that was amazing? Who he's retired now.
Des Bryant.
Des Bryant. Okay, yeah. That's how I've got him on a poster in my house, but Des Bryant was like sort of a star, right? In this and talk about like not understanding talent and making a mistake. Guy drafted him like in the second round because he was kind of like starting to fall as he was getting to the end of his career. But he got drafted in the second round. I think he had like one or two
Cowboys
bad.
fan that did that, right?
Yeah,
he's like, I'm going to take all the Cowboys.
Well, but he had a few bad games, and like it was like week 3, cuts Des Bryant.
Oh. Who just cuts Des Bryant?
Cuts
Who's this
Des
guy?
Bryant. Like, of course, someone snagged him, picked him up because he's Des Bryant.
Yeah. This happened to me last year.
Yeah,
It's
so you just make a mistake, like you don't understand, or you don't have the context, or maybe jump to some conclusion or something like that.
Last year in our keeper league, someone dropped DJ Moore in like week 2 or week 3.
Dang, that would have been a sweet
and I picked him up. And the way that it works in our keeper league is you can retain that player at the cost of where they were drafted. 1 round sooner than where they were drafted, but if they're picked up off the waivers, they can be your last pick in the draft. So I have DJ Moore in like the 15th round this year in my draft.
Yeah, that's pretty sweet.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. Okay, another one, handcuffs. Carson, you're familiar with the handcuff strategy, right?
Oh yeah,
yeah. You get your
gotta have the backup.
You get the backup. So on my teams, I always try to have a running back that is my anchor. And if I have a running back who's on my team who is that anchor, I always try to get his replacement because I know, or his backup, because if something happens to that guy, I don't want to be out a running back. Volume is the name of the game in fantasy football.
Like you're going to draft Christian McCaffrey, but there's a chance that he could go down with an injury pretty high.
His backup.
Elijah Mitchell,
a later pick.
Jordan Mason. You get the guy that's going to step in and fill that workload, especially when they're on a good team.
Sure.
I think this is relevant in business because if I'm out or something happens to me, I want the people on my team to be able to fill in for me and to have the skills necessary to complete my job in a way that will let the business proceed without any interruption. You need to have that redundancy.
What do you do about bye weeks, though? Like if you have the handcuff strategy, you hit a bye week, that's a double hit, right? Like what do you do for that situation?
Yeah, you got to have that depth, I guess. You got to anticipate it and watch what's happening.
Yeah.
Just like, I mean, that's got a real tie into what we do. Watching market trends and watching things that are happening. 3 years ago, our business was 75, 80% mortgage lead generation, right? And I remember meeting as a team, and we sat there and we said, it's looking like interest rates are going to go up. We're way too dependent on this certain industry. We need to diversify. And that was our objective, was to diversify. And within 6 months, we had really diversified into different verticals where mortgage and then rates jumped up a ton.
Yeah, they jumped up a ton.
March 22.
And so, so the whole opportunity in the mortgage market dropped. But fortunately, we had diversified in advance of that, and we were in personal lending, and we were in other financial services and home services and sales and business development work. And that enabled us to, when that bye week came or when something came that we were anticipating, we were able to diversify and make our team profitable. And
be nimble.
Put ourselves
be able to pivot.
In a good position. Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you do? Do you ever look at kind of the schedule, the calendar, and determining who you draft pick at all?
Well, here's an example. Like this year, I was listening to another pod, and they were talking about Jared Goff. And Goff only has 3 games this year outdoors in weather.
Oh, that's good.
And so he's like a later quarterback pick. You're not going to probably take him in the top of the available QBs, but he's got a good schedule. He's got a favorable schedule, good matchups indoors, and he's a good indoor quarterback.
Well, you being a Lions fan, you would definitely be paying attention to the Jared Goff situation.
And they play indoors. A lot of these teams play in coliseums with closed roofs or the ability to close the roof. And in the wintertime, that becomes really important because in the winter, it's the playoffs.
Yeah.
right? And I remember 2 years ago, I had Josh Allen in the playoffs, and it was like a snow game. There was so much snow, people couldn't even get into the parking lot. I remember being so nervous that like they wouldn't be able to play, or it would be impacted. He wouldn't be able to throw the ball because the weather was so poor. And then you've got Jared Goff in, at home, and or playing in Atlanta in their, in their Coliseum, in their dome, and perfect weather, perfect conditions for throwing the football.
Yeah, matchups come into play, especially like when I'm, generally like one of my strategies for drafting is I pick like defense in like the 15th round, like I'm not going to grab the top defense in the 9th or 10th round because I could still pick up a weapon there. But every week I could run a different defense that has a good matchup. Even the worst defenses.
Yeah, defense. If you're smart about defense, like you said, you swap them out all the time.
Yeah.
Look who's playing like last year. And this hurts me to say it because we're BYU guys and Zach Wilson was the quarterback. But whatever defense was going to play the Jets is the defense you could start, That's who you look for in those matchups.
Yeah, it's true. I lost one of my championships last year to someone who played the Raiders defense when Justin Herbert was injured. It was like Easton Stick was the quarterback, and their defense had 2 touchdowns, like 7 sacks.
I remember that. It was out of control.
I think it was you.
Yeah, that's right. That was me.
You.
No wonder I remember it. Yeah.
Yeah, you got like 30 points from your defense, and it took me down in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And
when I draft too, I kind of wait to do the defense as well. But I do like to look at positions where there's huge positive outliers. Like in the past, it's been Travis
and like some scarcity potentially. So tight
end, tight end, Travis Kelce. Historically, we'll see if this keeps up as he gets older and there's more weapons on the Chiefs. This might change because of that. But Travis Kelce at tight end was such a disparity that compared to anyone else that he was worth getting. And one of my guys is always Justin Tucker, the kicker for the Ravens.
Yeah, he's a Justin Tucker truther. You'll reach for
Tucker.
I
will reach for Justin Tucker, and the reason why is I've won leagues with Justin Tucker as the kicker. When he this hurts, I'm sorry to say this for the Lions. When they were playing the Lions, when they're first starting to get good for like with Campbell, and they were about to beat the Ravens, but then all of a sudden Justin Tucker kicks a 66-yard field goal. He broke the record, won the game, and got me like genuinely 20 fantasy football points, and I crushed that week, with my team because of Justin Tucker.
That's good. Yeah, you want to know your players that you like and who you want to go with. There's always the players that I'm like, I'm never going to want to ever. This goes back to Eli Manning, but I just don't want to draft any Giants at all ever.
Yeah.
Saquon Barkley, I don't care.
There's some heart there too.
Yeah.
There's certain teams where I just. If I don't want to watch them play on Sunday, I don't want to draft anyone from that team. That's one of my rules.
Well, and for a while, I've always hated the Cowboys because I was a 49ers fan growing up. But when the Cowboys were terrible for forever,
we've got a lot of clients in Dallas.
I better tone it down here real quick. I don't mind now. In fact, I kind of feel like the Cowboys. It's time for them to win again, just to justify all the hating, But before they picked up, Mike McCarthy is their current coach, and he took over the offense. I would never draft Cowboys. Even if they were going to be like a Des Bryant or whatever, I would never draft them because it just felt like their offense was so uneven. You could never predict who was going to be good. And when they would always fall apart towards the end of the season as well. And that's when you really need your players to perform. So I just wouldn't pick a Dallas Cowboy for years because of that.
But even on some of those teams, there's always little gems. Like last year, the Panthers were absolutely like diabolical to watch. Like they were bad. It was not a pleasant experience. But they had that running back, Chuba Hubbard.
Mm-hmm. That's right, Chuba
and
Hubbard.
He went off.
Showed up.
Yeah, that second half of the season, he was like a top 20 guy.
They have a new Deontay Johnson's going to be with the Panthers this year too. They have a new
coordinator, coordinator too, Dave Canales.
Yeah, and he's supposed to be pretty good.
He's supposed to be pretty decent. They could make a jump.
I tend not to do early investments into things that aren't predictable, though. And we've talked about this in the other podcasts. Like Carson's talked about, I'm just not going to throw spaghetti at the wall. For me, fantasy football, I'm not going to throw spaghetti at the wall when it's like a brand new offensive coordinator and a new system at a new team. I will not draft high on those ever. Even if it's like an existing known quantity player, I will not have him be one of my top picks if it's a new offense.
I will if there's historical evidence that the guy's good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
For me, though,
So-
it's a knockdown.
A nice thing about going with those key players on those bad teams is they're always going to be playing from behind. If it's a receiver,
Yeah.
they may get a lot of deep throws and those Hail Marys that they need to catch to win the game, kind of a thing. So they're always
Yeah.
playing from behind. So
Yeah.
those receivers on bad teams can be very valuable.
As long as the quarterback's got an arm, right?
Yeah.
Like I picked up George Pickens last year on one of the leagues.
Oh,
and
yeah.
sometimes it was great and sometimes it was terrible. One week he'd have 40 points and the next he'd have zero. And you're like, I can't build off of unpredictability, right? Like I need to build a team that I know is going to show up even if there's less points.
Yeah, and that's the last point is volume. Volume is king.
Yeah.
Right? When you're looking to draft your team, you want to make sure that you draft a team that you know there's opportunity and you know you can predict on a week-to-week basis what that workload is going to look like. I know in our business, we have aimed to have as much predictability as possible. In fact, we estimate and project our revenue on a day-to-day basis, and we report on it every single day. We measure it every day, and it's pretty dang close. It's within 1 or 2 percentage points pretty much every month. And it's because we've taken the time to understand what that volume is. We've tried to give ourselves and work with clients that'll give us that predictability, that scalability, and a level of security that we all feel comfortable with. And so then when we go to project it on a monthly basis, hey, this is what we're going to do. And we have historical evidence to show that. As much as you can, give yourself in business predictability and processes that are sustainable, partnerships that are sustainable with very little variance, because not only does that allow you to project your revenues, but it allows you to align your costs with your revenues, and you won't have a day where all of a sudden everything's out of alignment.
Yeah, that's a big thing for us with the projects we take on is, being able to know that we can count on a certain volume, a certain staffing size, that we're not going to have a lot of, ups and downs, variance and things. And those KPIs that we're measuring, it's just similar to the fantasy football stats where we're looking at like how many touches, how many receptions, how many yards they get after every game. You're kind of looking at those stats, maybe even in real time. Similarly, we do that with the business every day where we review, and that's one of the best parts about our business is that it becomes very predictable, very scalable when you can. But when we have clients that it's like, hey, we're not sure how this is going to perform. It may be 20 leads today, it may be 80 leads tomorrow, it may be no leads, and so where we're performance based, it's hard for us to invest in and commit resources to something that's going to be very unpredictable or unknown. And then we end up with what is our biggest cost, which is unproductive labor, where agents are sitting around, they're not able to perform, they're not able to do any work because they don't have any, inventory, basically, any material to work with.
We've mentioned this before, we're pay for performance company, so if our agents aren't busy, we're just paying them, and they're not generating any value for us.
And one of my philosophies in fantasy football, in any game I play, and this may sound hardcore, but I want to win by as many points as possible. I don't want to win by 1 point. I want to win by 50, right? And when you have the attention to detail and the constant measurement of performance, and you're always trying to do more, always trying to do better, and that's what we do at Squeeze, genuinely, is we're always pushing to do more. It's never enough. We have clients that have been around for 5-10 years, and we're always looking for the next thing we can do to drive up performance. And that's because we want to win by as much as possible.
Every little edge
always.
you can get, you should look to have.
Yeah.
Right?
And you find it in the details, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that's really important. I think understanding, we mentioned this earlier, but understanding like all of those little details and all of the context around what's happening will help you make much, much better decisions in the long run.
I'm going to pull on one of Jacob's things that he hits on a lot with fantasy football stuff, which is recency bias. I know that that's something that you bring up a lot, where it's like recency bias with players where maybe they have a really big week. You're like, hey, look at this player. He put up 40 points. He's amazing, incredible.
Put him in the window, right?
And then Jacob is immediately putting him up for sale. Like someone's going to buy him.
I love that. Yeah.
And I'm going to get, a top 5 running back or receiver for this person that just had a sort of a fluke of a game. But recency bias in your business too, when you're making decisions, you want to make decisions based off of the whole data and maybe the full picture, full context of what's going on versus just maybe one standout performance. Hey, I saw that person in the hallway and they smiled at me. They seem like a really sharp person. Let's promote them.
Mm-hmm.
Let's make them a manager now or whatever. Recency bias, right? Like maybe you have one interaction and you're like, let's I think there's a whole thing about that in Office Space, the movie. I don't know if people that are in business and watching this that are my age probably remember that, but the guy's like, hey, you know what? You seem like a straight shooter. You got management written all over you.
Yeah,
Makes him the manager.
Yeah.
So he's
How was
like,
your performance for the last 2 weeks,
Yeah.
or 2 months, or 2 years, right?
Yep.
You've got to have a significant sample to make a good decision. You're right. The opposite is true too. When we're negotiating trades, if like I've played Nate and he's just lost to me because his running back on Monday night laid a goose egg and had just a terrible game, I'm going to reach out and say, hey, you're probably pretty frustrated with this guy. You want to send him on over here? And that'll help a lot too.
Snag some
both ways.
underperformers.
Yeah, buy low, sell high.
Yeah,
That's right.
One of the things I noticed last season with you as well is I'm a really stingy trader. I don't like trading, but you traded enough that I started to notice that he would trade to get somebody because he wanted that person to trade with somebody else. And like you were thinking 3 or 4 trades down the line. You knew if you could get Austin Eckler from me, Mitch, one of the people on your team, he will give you anything for Austin Eckler, And so you planned for it. So that's always good just to kind of have that strategic mind to see, hey, in the future, I know if I do these things, it'll set me up for what we need to have going on in the future for it too.
To be fair, I'm pretty sure that trade won you the championship.
Absolutely. But it's because I rejected a bunch of other trades with other people, and I just started, and Carson wanted to trade, and it was a little bit favorable to you. And I was looking at it, I was like, do you have to trade with the boss here? I didn't know if that was a thing or not, but I didn't. But
I will always negotiate in good faith, Nate.
That's right.
One of my favorite fantasy football memories isn't in our league. It's in a different league that I'm in. And I've been in that league for like 12 or 14 years as well. And there was a year where one of the guys couldn't make it. And he's like, hey, will you draft my team for me? And I'm like, I hate that. I don't want to draft somebody else's team for them. That's like the worst. And you're like picking your players, and then you're like trying to be, unbiased and pick them the best player possible, build them a good team. And I felt like I did him a pretty good solid and drafted him who he would have liked to have picked who was available. And anyway, we played the whole season. It was a pretty competitive league. This wasn't like a bunch of people that didn't know what they were doing. It was probably one of the more competitive groups I've played with that they seem like they all watch ESPN way more than I do. And anyway, we get to the end of the season and we ended up playing in the championship against each other, and he beat me. And he didn't make any trades or waiver wire pickups. He stuck with the team, the core team. Everybody was who I drafted, and then he beat me in the championship. And so we always laugh about that every year we get together, and it's always one of the funny things that we remember. And just stuff that just those things that happen when you're doing fantasy football that just like are fun and make the days go by.
Well, this is a good business one too. If you ever feel like Carson's going to deal with you honestly, now you know. He'll draft you a better team than he'll draft for himself.
And beat myself.
Yeah, so honesty matters in these sort of situations. Well, gentlemen, I think we've hit our limit here, and we don't want to give away too much secret sauce in fantasy football. We still want to be the winners this year. So we'll go ahead and conclude. You've been watching the Juice Consumer Direct podcast with Nate Clegg, Carson Poppenger, and Jacob Thorpe.
Give us a like and subscribe. Check it out. Share it with your friends.
Any questions, comments, leave them below, and we'll make sure we get to them.